Today, we're diving into one of the most ambitious and, controversial ideas in the history of psychology. It's the story of a quest to build a perfect science of the mind by promising to ignore the mind completely. This is our explainer on how we learn.
I mean, really think about it. Those things feel automatic, right? It all comes down to a fundamental process, learning. But what is learning? For a long time, that question seemed totally unanswerable, like trying to bottle a thought. But the answers scientists eventually found are still shaping our lives in ways we barely even notice, from our tiniest habits to our biggest emotional reactions.
So let's go back to the turn of the 20th century. Psychology had this huge problem. How do you scientifically study something you can't see or touch or measure, like a thought, a feeling, a memory? This became known as the black box problem. The mind was this mysterious box, and nobody had a clue how to open it up and see what was inside.
But then, some researchers got really clever. A psychologist named Edward Thorndike, for example, built these puzzle boxes for cats. And if you look at this graph, you can see something pretty amazing. With every single try, the cats got faster and faster at escaping. They weren't just guessing. You could see they were learning. This was a huge deal. It was proof that you could actually measure learning just by watching what someone, or some cat, does.
And it wasn't just about physical actions. Around the same time, Hermann Ebbinghaus decided to tackle memory. He spent countless hours memorizing lists of nonsense syllables and then meticulously tracked how quickly he forgot them. And what he came up with was this, the famous forgetting curve. It shows how our memory just nosedives without practice or review. So here was another piece of the mind, memory, being measured in a totally objective way.
These early studies were basically setting the stage for a radical new idea that would just take over psychology for decades: behaviorism. And the proposal was as simple as it was bold. Forget thoughts, forget feelings, forget consciousness. If you can't see it and measure it, it doesn't belong in science. Psychology, they said, should only study observable behavior, period.
To a true behaviorist, the mind was a complete black box. They didn't just think it was hard to study, they thought it was completely irrelevant. All that mattered was the stimulus that went in, let's say a loud noise, and the behavioral response that came out, like jumping in fear. Everything else happening in between, inside your head, to them, it was just meaningless noise.
Okay, so if you're throwing out thoughts and feelings, how do you explain learning? Well, the behaviorist's first major tool was all about associations, how our brains learn to connect two totally different things out in the world. And this slide shows the classic example you've probably heard of, Pavlov's dogs. So at first, you've got food, which naturally makes a dog salivate, and you've got a bell, which does nothing. But then Pavlov starts ringing the bell right before he gives the food, over and over and over. Pretty soon, the dog's brain builds a new connection, and now the sound of the bell alone is enough to make the dog drool. A new behavior has been learned. This is exactly why a certain jingle can make you crave a soda, or why the smell of a hospital might instantly make you feel a little anxious.
Now that's dogs, but could this really apply to something as complex as human emotions? John B. Watson, the so-called father of behaviorism, was determined to prove it. In a deeply controversial and frankly unethical experiment, he took a baby known as Little Albert. At first, the baby loved a little white rat, wasn't scared of it at all. But then Watson started making a loud, terrifying noise with a steel bar every single time the baby reached for the rat. It didn't take long. Soon, just the sight of the rat, or anything fluffy and white, was enough to make Little Albert cry. He had been conditioned to feel fear.
But let's be honest, learning isn't just about automatic reflexes. The next huge idea in behaviorism explored how the consequences of our actions are what really shape our future behavior.
And the absolute master of this idea was B.F. Skinner. He argued that almost all of our voluntary behaviors, from talking to working to playing sports, are shaped by their consequences. It's really simple at its core. If you do something and a good thing happens, you're more likely to do it again. If a bad thing happens, you're less likely. It sounds simple, but Skinner showed this principle was unbelievably powerful.
Okay, this slide is key, so let's walk through it together. Skinner laid out 4 ways our behavior gets shaped. Now, the most important thing to get right here is that positive and negative do not mean good or bad. Positive just means adding something. Negative means taking something away. So positive reinforcement is adding something good, like getting a paycheck. Negative reinforcement is taking away something bad, like taking an aspirin to get rid of a headache. See how both of those make you want to repeat the behavior? Punishment, on the other hand, always makes a behavior less likely to happen again.
And just how powerful is this?
Well, get this. In a top-secret project during World War II, Skinner used operant conditioning to train pigeons to guide missiles. No, I'm not kidding. He would reward them with food every time they pecked at an image of an enemy ship on a little screen. He actually trained them to be a living, breathing guidance system. And the crazy part? It worked. This just goes to show you the incredible faith behaviorists had in their ability to shape and control absolutely any behavior.
But was that really the whole story? Could you really explain all human learning with just automatic associations and direct consequences? A new idea began to bubble up that put a huge crack in that theory. This brings us to one of the most famous experiments in all of psychology. A psychologist named Albert Bandura wanted to know if we could learn without any direct rewards or punishments at all. So he had a group of kids watch a video of an adult just going to town on this inflatable doll named Bobo, punching it, kicking it, yelling at it.
All right, so after the kids watched the video, they were led into a playroom that had a bunch of toys, including the exact same Bobo doll. And here's the crucial part. They were just left alone. Nobody told them what to do, nobody offered them a cookie for hitting the doll, or a timeout for leaving it alone. Nothing. So what happened? It was unbelievable. The kids who saw the aggressive adult made a beeline for that doll and copied the exact same behaviors, punching it, hitting it with a mallet, even shouting the same insults. They had learned a complex, aggressive behavior without a single stimulus or reinforcement. They learned just by watching. This was a massive crack in the armor of pure behaviorism.
Bandura's experiment wasn't an isolated event. It was part of this growing wave of evidence that suggested that actually what happens inside that black box of the mind, well, it matters a whole lot. For instance, another psychologist, Edward Tolman, had rats just wander around a maze, with no cheese at the end, no reward at all. Later, when he finally put a reward in, those rats solved the maze way faster than rats who had never seen it before. The only way to explain this was that the first group of rats had been learning the whole time, building a mental map of the maze in their heads. This was clear evidence of cognition, of thinking, happening inside the black box.
But the final showdown, the battle that really changed everything, was over language. Skinner argued that we learn to talk just like a pigeon learns to peck a disc, through simple reinforcement for saying the right words. But then the linguist Noam Chomsky came along and just blew that argument out of the water. He pointed out that children say things they'd never heard before, create sentences they couldn't possibly have been rewarded for. He argued that the human brain must come pre-wired with a capacity for language. The black box, it turned out, was not empty at all. This debate basically launched the cognitive revolution, which brought the study of the mind roaring back into psychology.
So, what's the big takeaway here? Was behaviorism just wrong? Not at all. It wasn't the whole picture, but it was far from useless. It gave us these three incredibly powerful concepts for understanding how we learn. Classical conditioning explains our gut reactions and those weird emotional associations. Operant conditioning is the engine that drives our habits, and observational learning explains how we pick up skills and culture from the people around us. These are absolutely essential tools for understanding why we do what we do.
So let's bring it back to you. Think about it. The buzz of a notification on your phone, the little red heart of a like on social media, a simple good job from your boss. These are all little hits of reinforcement, shaping your behavior every single day. The question is, now that you can see the strings, what are you going to do with that knowledge?